Hi, my name is Logan Walker with the Walk of Life podcast, where I interview people, break down their lives, and get to know what they know. Welcome, Aaragon Markwell. He was a missionary in Russia and a graduate student at a Bible college, is currently a contractor and a pastor at First Baptist. Welcome. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me. So, I pastor the church as well as I'm kind of the chief maintenance guy and official janitor at times and whatnot. So
kind of do all the little things behind the scene that
yeah.
nobody really sees. That's pretty cool, you know. That's something special as it is.
So we've been here for now. Let me see. Moved here in 2011. So, yeah, we're kind of getting settled into the area. When I first came here, my oldest, Josiah, was in 6th grade. And now he's 23 and married. Well, I'm going to get married here shortly. And so yeah, we've gotten settled into the area.
Yeah, that's good to hear. So 10 years here. And what was like, what made you want to come here?
You know, this is kind of strange. So when I was in graduate school in Tacoma, we would occasionally come down to go to Long Beach to get away. And I remember sometime along that period that we drove through South Bend and Raymond. I thought, this would be a kind of a cool little town to live in. It seems out of the way and it seems rural and whatnot. And that was just kind of in the back of my mind. And then we went to Russia for 3 years and worked as missionaries and then came home. And our home base was Eatonville up by Mount Rainier.
Okay.
And we went on vacation again. Melinda, my wife's parents, came out and watched the kids, so we ran down to Long Beach. And on the way down here, I noticed a white church on the left-hand side as we came down 101. It's no longer white; it's a grayish color. But anyways, on the way back, I just kind of pulled over and I noticed on the reader board that they had the phrase interim pastor and so-and-so. Somebody else was preaching. I thought, that's interesting. They've got an interim. I wonder if they're looking for a full-time guy. So right. I just called the church and said, hey, are you guys accepting resumes? They said, well, we were thinking about doing that here shortly. And I said, well, do you want to have mine? And so I sent it on in and over the course of several months, coming down and visiting and preaching for them, they said, well, come on down. So there you go. I don't know if that's a good methodology for finding a job, but driving around and just calling random people.
That's about the best way you can do it. You just got to put yourself out there, offer up your resume, where you can.
Yeah, so that's.
So the first question that I ask everybody who comes on is, what do you want your legacy to be? That's kind of my staple. After you pass, how do you want to be remembered?
Yeah. I guess, number one, I would like to be remembered as a man of conviction. And number two, and not number two as in importance, but just a guy who loved God and was committed to his faith. So, those are probably the primary things that drive me. So
right, yeah, that's good to hear because I'm a Christian as well.
Okay, right.
And I was my first year of college. I took a philosophy class.
Interesting.
And it really shook me up. I didn't know what to believe at that point, and so my professor was really good. He didn't persuade you in any way, but he was, we were learning so much at that time. And so after the class, I was like, wow. I don't know. Yeah. And then I went to college, and my best friend was a good-hearted Christian, great guy. And we used to do these things called Sunday drives, and we would just go for a drive, and we were just looking around. It was our first one we did together. And he's seen this river, the Missouri River, running across, and there's this bridge that came across it.
Okay, so where do you go to school at?
Missouri Valley College.
Okay.
And an hour east of Kansas City.
Okay.
And so we were driving across it, and he goes, dude, I love bridges, pull over. I was like, okay, cool. So we pulled over, and we walked out on this bridge, on a main highway. We just walked out, and he's like, It was like right as the sun was setting, like hitting the water. And he looks at me and says, "There's no way that's a coincidence."
Yeah.
You know, there's no way all that fell in place. And I was like, you know, it's just snapped for me right then and there. And I was like, wow.
You know, people who have a philosophy of, you know, atheistic materialism, you know, guys like Richard Dawkins, even when they are speaking about the world, they can't help but use the language of design and creation and order. And whenever you use terminology like that, these are verbs that require a subject. You know, things don't design themselves. You have designers.
Right.
And it is just so incomprehensible that you can look at the magnitude of the diversity of any biological system and the ecosystem with multiple biological systems interacting with each other. And say, yeah, that was a chance. Yeah, that was just you know, that was a rock bumping into another rock, and lo and behold, you know, here we go. We have all this tremendously complicated life on Earth. No, that is not a blind faith. That's a degree of credulity that it's just it is unfathomable to embrace that. So
and then where do the rocks come from?
yeah. How do things come to life from non-living matter? But yeah, no. The fact that the world around us is so well designed, and we have the ability to perceive beauty. It's like going through an art gallery.
Right.
When you look at the things on the wall and you say, wow, how did all that paint come to order and, you know, fall onto the canvas? And just, no, that's foolishness. Mm-hmm. There's an artist who designed all this, and it's beautiful, and we can tell. So.
Yeah, I couldn't put it better myself. So where did you grow up, and so how did your parents kind of raise you?
Okay, so I was born in 1974, so I'm a Gen Xer. Grew up in Eatonville. My mom and biological father were both authentic hippies. My mom was a high school dropout. Dad was a Vietnam vet. Mom had a VW van, was traveling around Eastern Washington picking fruit, and you know, just, I mean, yeah, it was pretty wild. And they met each other and then produced me. Unfortunately, they got a divorce when I was about a year and a half, so I didn't really know my biological father until I was 17 years old. My mother remarried to my stepdad, a guy from Olympia area. They got a divorce when I was 11, so kind of a critical time in my life. 11 years old, growing up, and you know, going through a divorce that was traumatic. But
so you said that was traumatic. How did that like affect you? Like as going into your teens, having a divorce happen in your life.
It was very unsettling, to say the least. I mean, at that age, the structure that a mom and dad provide,
right.
I mean, it's everything. It was everything, and it rocked my world, and I was significantly impacted by that. And then, coincidentally, in my high school years and whatnot, I really floundered. So. I became a Christian when I was 11 years old. My mother put me in a private school for academic reasons because, you know, it's kind of weird. When I first started going to school, I remember in first and second grade thinking that homework was kind of an optional thing. Like if you wanted to do it, you could. And I just felt like, well, I go to school during the day, and no, wait a minute, you're telling me I have to take this home and work in it? No, that I do school at school, and no, this is my time. And so I kind of maintained that little attitude when I was a kid and did very poorly. And I remember in fourth grade, I was just really lagging behind. So my mom, for academic reasons, being coaxed by my aunt, put me into this private school, but it happened to be a Christian school. And in that Christian school, I was just exposed to the gospel. I was exposed. They would have a Bible lesson time at the beginning of every class or every day, and they just presented the gospel, and it had a profound effect on me. My mother was afraid that I would grow up to be a preacher. She thought, oh, no, not one of those. Because I was harassing her. I said, we need to go to church, Mom. We need to do this. And that was right about the time they got a divorce. That school went to sixth grade. Then I went back to a public school. And in that period of time, I just thought, you know what? I was so insecure. I thought to myself, I'm going to this new environment. I don't have any friends. Man, I can't live for God right now. I need to go out and I need to find friends. I need to get my feet underneath me, and I'll do the God thing later. It was kind of a conscious decision I made at seventh grade. That didn't work out so well. I was, especially in high school, I was floundering really bad. In fact, I never graduated high school. I ended up getting my GED.
Really?
Yeah. So, middle of my junior year, I had decided that all the classes I was taking were kind of dumb, which, yeah, they probably were. I liked wood shop. I would go to wood shop in the morning, but then after that, I would just take off and do whatever I wanted to do.
Go home and...
Actually, we would, this buddy of mine, we would go to his house, and he had a Ford LTD, really loud. His mom was at home, but we would roll it down the road a little bit, a block away, and then start up. They'd go to the Tacoma Mall and hang out for the day, and just kind of mess around. And then, doing that for a couple months, the principal invited me not to come back to school any longer. So I said, well, fine, I'm out of here. So I had a job working at a local dairy farm, and I was milking cows and going nowhere with my life, and I knew it, and it drove me nuts.
Was there like a moment in time where you're like, I gotta change like right now? Yeah,
I don't remember which day it was, but I was milking cows at night, and it was about a 10-hour shift, and I thought, my goodness, this is pretty crappy. I don't want to do this forever. Yeah. And so basically I swallowed my pride. And I went back to school the second part of my senior year. And there was a teacher there by the name of Dennis Clevenger. Great man. He was one of these guys that he just commanded authority without using any force. He dressed a little bit, he had the pocket protector, and he always had the short sleeve shirt, collar. I mean, he dressed professional, but kind of, well, he probably won't be listening to this, but he looked kind of nerdy, honestly.
Yeah.
But he had such a passion for teaching that if anybody was screwing around in his class, he'd just stop talking. And suddenly this hush would come over all the students. And they were just like, oh, sorry. And he would teach, but he also happened to be a Christian. And he had a rule that he said that anybody who gets 3 tardies in my class gives me 30 minutes after class. So, of course, I got 3 tardies. And as I was giving him 30 minutes, he told me, he started asking me questions. He said, I talked to a lot of the teachers, and they say you're kind of a handful. But I don't see that in my class here. And I just told him, I guess I'm kind of rebellious, but I'm just looking for something. I'm looking for meaning. And I was really looking for, why am I here? I don't think anything has changed between when I was a kid and today. People wonder who they are, why they're here, where did I come from, and what ultimately is at the end of this life? What's on the other side of the finish line?
Those are some really big, important questions.
Yeah. I wrestled with them when I was 17. I think people wrestle with it now. I think the whole movement with identity and, especially the LGBT movement, it's trying to answer the same question that I was asking. Who am I, and what am I, and where did I come from? So, anyways, he as a public school teacher, off hours, he said, why don't you come to church with me? Why don't you come some Sunday? Check it out. I thought, wow, I'm a bad kid.
Right.
I can't do that. I'm the dropout kid. Vandalism, hooligan kind of. No, I'm not the church kind. And 3 weeks went by, and one morning I just kind of hopped in my old Ford pickup truck and thought, well, I'll go check it out. And when I went to church there at the Baptist Church in Eatonville, I remember walking through the door, realizing it was just this surreal experience that it was as though I had said to God in 7th grade, I'll catch you later. And then all those years later, I went back to church, and he's like, well, I'm here. I've been waiting.
Like, we'll go home.
Yeah. And it was just like the parable of the prodigal son. So that was really quite a bit. I had never gone to church. So I'm a pastor. I'm a Baptist pastor. But I had never gone to church one time from all my growing up years until I was 19. So
that is crazy. And it was like, we're pretty much after that, 19, it was like every weekend.
Well, so yeah, every weekend. And then very shortly, it was kind of weird. There was a youth group. I started going to youth group. We had all of these kids in there that were, 4.0 honor roll students. And then here I'm the dropout kid, and I just did not fit in very well at all. But my youth pastor said, I think you need to go to Bible college. And I said, I don't think I need to go to Bible college. School and I were not on good talking terms, and I just, no, thank you. And I shot him down. And I was going to do my own thing. Actually, I decided I want to be a rancher. Okay. So my plan is that I was going to, first of all, go to a horseshoeing school, and I did that. Actually shoot horses for a while. And then I was going to go to a herdsman school and then maybe get some automotive and, construction experience. And I wanted to be a rancher. I wanted to go to Montana and be a rancher.
So did you kind of map this out in your mind, or did you write it down? And so you had a big plan out and you were ready to go?
Yep.
And moved to Montana?
Yeah, that was my goal. That's what I wanted to do. And I went down to Oklahoma to do the horseshoeing school. It was a 6-week class. I'd hopped on a bus and rode cross country in a Greyhound, which is an experience I don't encourage anyone to duplicate. But did that, came back, started my business. I was going to be a horseshoer, but I was miserable. I was depressed, and I didn't understand why. I was just so, I don't know. I just felt so a lack of peace. Finally, one day I picked up the phone and I called them and I said, well, I'll go to Bible college for a year if you want. Yeah, I'll do that. And it was like this sudden peace, it was like on a stifling hot day, a cold breeze coming in. Right. And I just felt this amazing peace come over me. So the school I had planned to go to in Montana, it was too late. So there was another one in upstate New York. So he and a bunch of other people in the church, in a course of 2 weeks time period, got a plane ticket, went shopping to buy clothes and all this stuff. And before I knew it, I was flying to upstate New York to go to Bible college.
What a change. And how did that affect you just up and, first of all, getting your G&D and then just moving out on your own, to Montana. And then all of a sudden you're like, this ain't right.
Yeah.
How did that kind of affect you and your
Well, it was
mind?
very unsettling because, So I grew up in an era where there were no cell phones, there's no internet. In fact, that first year of Bible college, I remember people talking about email, and I thought, what's the point of that? I mean, why email? You just write a letter and you stick it in the mail. Why I have to have a computer to read a letter? I thought it didn't make sense. So there was no calling home and, hey, or can I send you an email? Or it was very secluded. And I got into New York. And New York is a very different place than the West Coast. The East Coast is very different culturally. I got in at 3:00 in the morning, and then I got settled in my bunk, and there was an assembly the next morning. I had taken the wrong route, and I came in late, and I got in there, and they were singing a Bible song, and it was kind of goofy and had motions, and I thought, oh my goodness, I am in a cult in upstate New York, and Washington is on the other side of the country, and I was freaking out a little bit. It wasn't actually a cult, but it was some real culture shock, significant. Right. And so I didn't grow up in the Christian home, and so I was quite a bit different than a lot of the kids who came from the nurturing, loving Christian home, grew up in church thing. And I was a little bit different. But I was where I needed to be. And I was going to do 1 year of Bible college, then come back, and I was going to be the rancher again. That's what I wanted to do. I had an opportunity to do open air evangelism in Boston. And what we would do is, you've probably seen street preachers who would get up there and yell at people and blah, blah, repent.
Yeah.
It's not very effective, honestly.
Right.
So what we had is a paint board. We'd begin painting a picture, and we would use block letters, which the block letter system, you just put in a little dash of paint here and there, and suddenly a word appears. So we would begin painting, and people would kind of slow down and say, well, what's he drawing here? And midway through, you'd just stop and introduce yourself and say, hey, I'd like to tell you about my painting here. And basically, I'm a Christian, and what I want to talk about two people here on my painting. And you would say, the first one you know very well, and that's you, and then there's God. And basically, you'd share the gospel in a very open, not condemnation type of harassing way, but just to share. And I did that the first time I did it. I was getting all ready. I was standing at the board, and then I turned around because I was about ready to start, and there was like 80 people there. I mean, I don't know where all these people came from. And I went through it, and it just felt like this is it. I knew at that moment that God wanted me to tell people about him forever, for the rest of my life.
That was like the moment right then and there. Yeah. And when you had those 80 people, was it like an overwhelming feeling? Was it
it was kind of overwhelming, but it was also dread. It was, I didn't want to I don't want to do the pastor thing.
So you were still kind of fighting that feeling?
Well, I was fighting it, but then I remembered how depressed I was when I came back from the horseshoeing school and was going to do my own thing, and I just was, God is so strong. I don't want to wrestle with him anymore.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, okay, God, I'll do this. All right, we'll do it. And, I had no clue as to what to do or where to go or what. But I met my wife there. And I ended up finishing up my bachelor's degree in West Virginia. As though New York was not enough of a culture shock when you go to West Virginia. It's like, whoa, it's really different down here.
So you pretty much traveled all the way around the country.
Yeah. In terms of states I've lived in, so here Washington, of course, did a year in New York, did 3 years in West Virginia, did a year in Michigan, did almost a year in South Carolina studying Russian. And then I lived in Russia for 3 years, Ukraine for 3 months. And then I've visited, I've been throughout Europe, went to Brazil one time on a mission trip, had a chance to go visit Togo, West Africa, and had a chance to go to Israel twice, which was probably the highlight of my travels.
Yeah, I'm going to say that's probably like the dream.
It is. I recommend anybody who is a Christian, it is such a good thing to do and to go and to see. And I'm just blown away at how many things you can go and actually look at and see that have biblical significance. Caiaphas, the high priest, they have his ossuary, which is like a little stone box that has his bones in it.
Really?
Yeah.
So
they have that in the museum there in Jerusalem. I mean, you can see these things like, wow, that's pretty wild. They've got Herod's coffin that they've unearthed. Herod the Great, who tried to kill Jesus as a baby. Yeah, they have. I mean, it's just, the place is so full of history everywhere.
Is it like a museum more of, or is it like a functioning town, city?
A lot of these artifacts and whatnot you're going to find in the museum, but you can walk around in the old city of Jerusalem, and this is where Jesus walked. He walked on these stones. You can. I went through Hezekiah's tunnel. So in about the year 70 BC, Hezekiah, the king of Israel, or king of Judah, is being invaded by the Assyrian army, and so he fortifies the wall around the city, and he digs a tunnel down to a spring, and it was done in haste. And you can actually go there and walk through this tunnel that was dug out by pick. And presumably by torch light. And it's like, this is right here, 700 BC. This is when they dug this out. And it's just, it blows you away.
What kind of feeling do you get when you're in there?
So I've studied a lot about the Bible. I've studied a lot about history. But every square foot of Israel, and especially Jerusalem, there is millennia of history there. You've got the walls, the current walls around the old part of the city, which were built by Saladin. I can't remember the year, but that was sort of the Middle Ages. You've got bigger stones, large stones that were set there by Herod the Great. In fact, if you go to the underground tour of the Temple Mount, there are stones there that are so large and so massive that we have no idea how they quarried them out and moved them there. And just with the craftsmanship is just superb. It's amazing.
Really?
Yeah.
I put that on my bucket list now.
Yeah, you've got that, and then you can go to another part. And well, okay, here's where Hezekiah's wall was at, and they've unearthed part of that, and so that goes back another 700 years. It's just it becomes. It's like trying to listen to 7 or 8 different people at the same time. He's got all these voices because every square foot of ground over there has layers upon layers of history. It's
unbelievable.
Pretty wild. It's pretty wild.
So what was the first country you got your bachelor's in West Virginia?
Yes, got my bachelor's in West Virginia.
Entered the missionary. Where was that? Where was the first place?
Okay, so as soon as I finished getting my bachelor's, at that point I kind of thought God wanted me to be a pastor. But I should probably go overseas and, be exposed to the whole mission arena. So I knew a guy who was taking a trip over to Odessa, Ukraine, and then into Chisinau, Moldova. So that was my first overseas adventure, and it was unique. It was back. Let's see, that was back in '98. So there was still. The Soviet Union fell apart in the late '80s, but it was still fairly backward and whatnot. So it was an experience to go through all the different security and the requirements for special taxation to get through here and there. A lot of bribery and whatnot. But it was amazing. It was pretty awesome.
And your wife went with you?
Actually, she did not go with me that time because that was a short 2-week trip, and we were. It was expensive, so we were trying to save a few bucks, and she went home to spend some time with parents while I was over there. So that was my first overseas adventure. Came back from there, then moved back to Tacoma, started doing seminary. After seminary, I went back to teach a short unit, a class on hermeneutics, the science and art of interpretation of biblical text, but all writing. Did that in Chisinau, Moldova, and just thought, you know what, I really like the international scene. I like going overseas, and I really liked Eastern Europe, and so kind of thought, well, maybe I should be a missionary, and so. That planted the seed in our head. So we didn't know where at first. We thought maybe, I don't know. There were a lot of people at ABWE, which is the group we went with, that there were a lot of people there that had done missions in Africa. And we thought, well, maybe Africa. I don't know, maybe. And we went there, and Togo, West Africa was, that's a difficult place to do ministry.
Really? Not a lot of Christians there?
Well, there's a fair amount of Christians, but it is like camping continuously. It's heat, bugs, snakes, and just devastating poverty like you can't imagine there. And it's a challenging place. Sometimes you can stretch a rubber band so far, but eventually it'll break. And it was a very. I think we would have struggled being there because it's tough.
How long were you? Did you go? How long were you there?
We just went there for a quick 2-week trip to visit, and the mission group that we were with, they had a hospital there and basically a blind center for kids who were born blind. They would teach them how to make baskets and do various trades to try to survive. But But yeah, no, it was an interesting place. I was preaching one evening, and there was there they have these termite mounds that are huge.
Just huge, yeah.
And I'm preaching, and all of a sudden, just 10 billion flying termites descended onto the church, and they're everywhere, and they're crawling on me and on my Bible, and all the Africans were like, just keep on going, and it was. It took me a little bit of a focus to keep on preaching when I'm preaching here, and wipe off the bugs as they're landing on me. And
I guess that kind of informs a great deal of discipline and.
Yes, it helps you maintain your train of thought. Speaking through a translator is a skill you have to remember to speak in complete thought units. So then wait for them. But as you're waiting and you're listening to them, when they stop talking, that means you need to talk again. And if you're focusing too much on what they're saying, then you're going to forget what you're going to say. So speaking through a translator was interesting. There was one place where in Togo, up further north, I had to speak through two translators. So I spoke English. French is the official language there. You translate into French. And then there were about 40 different tribal languages in that country. Country of 5 million, but 40 different tribal languages. And then, the third translator would take the French and translate that into, I think that was Eve or Kabylie. I can't remember which language, but yeah. So that's really, I wonder how much of my actual words got through there.
So moving back here and preaching here was like a breeze, huh?
Oh yeah, boy, no kidding. Although when I was living in Russia for 3 years, I didn't preach in English at all. I did preach in Russian a couple different times. I think they were pretty simplistic messages, but my language wasn't quite to the level where I could pontificate very well. But coming back here, at times I found wait, what is the word? How do you? And it was your brain begins to shift and forget things when you don't use. We don't use English all the time.
Right.
It was. So, I got a few cobwebs in my brain for the English dissection. And gee whiz. I probably other people don't have that kind of an issue. They've got good linguistic minds, but I've got about room in my head for 1.5 languages. So that's about it.
So in Russia, you had your first kid?
No, actually, so we had all three of our children before we went to Russia. My oldest is 23, and my youngest is 17. We moved there in 2007, and we stayed till 2010. So my oldest, Josiah, he was in second grade. We homeschooled him, but I also stuck him in a Russian school just to be around other Russian kids and to learn the language. He got to the point where he could understand Russian probably better than I could. Now, I could say more because I'd studied vocabulary, but he was very, he did great there. He really adjusted well. Actually, he was kind of stressed and, sad to leave.
Really?
Because I was home.
That's all I knew at that point. Yeah.
My middle, she was speaking Russian without an accent. She was 5 when we moved there, and we would have people come to the door, and maintenance men or whatever in the apartment complex where we lived, and knock on the door and try to explain something to Melinda, and Melinda, I don't know what he's saying, and Alethea would come and say, "Well, Mommy, he said this," and she was trained. Well, thank you, dear.
That's kind of cool. That's how good their schools were. It must have been.
Well, it's more of they do have good schools. They do have good schools. In fact, all the schools there, when they begin a second language, it's in first, second grade, which is when you should start to learn a language because your brain is naturally wired to just through osmosis take in a language and learn to speak it. Up until, I forget what the age is, 7 or 8, and you just kind of absorb it. Right. After that point, you have to learn a language via grammar, and that's how I learned it, which it sticks with you longer. I can still speak Russian, I still remember a lot of the rules, and you do this because of this and whatnot. They learned it simply by, well, this is just how you say it.
Right.
But they forgot it quicker. So, yeah.
So when you do look at the schools, and how was the difference from here to there?
Well, the schools there, the educational system was, I think, superior. The funding was incredibly inferior. I mean, they did school in buildings that we would have condemned here. They're just, but the quality of education is not determined by your facilities.
Absolutely.
That is something we've forgotten. Secondly, I noticed that their objective is not to, well, I'll use this as an illustration. You go to a playground here. Now, all the good toys, when the Gen Xers like myself were growing up, they're all gone. We don't have teeter-totters. We don't have the spinny thing that would throw the kids off, we don't have hardly any swings anymore. We have safe playground equipment, which is usually pretty boring. Over there, so we lived in a large building that had a playground in front of it. The equipment there looked like it was for a military training boot camp scenario. I mean, they had this...
Like a big obstacle course?
Yes, it was, this one big cube thing. I think it went up probably about 20 feet in the air. And I thought, if a kid falls off that, he's going to break something.
Yeah, guaranteed.
Yeah, guaranteed. They also had, this was so cool. This was so cool. I did this one time. It was a lot of fun. They had a teeter-totter, but it wasn't for sitting on. It was, you would hold it with your hands. The fulcrum in the middle was about, 7-8 feet in the air. And so you get somebody on the other end and you jump, and then when they went down, it would fling you up, and it felt like you're about 15 feet in the air. If you let go, you're going to go flying.
Right.
But they had stuff like that, and every kid gets banged up and beat up, but their objective is not to create soft kids. I mean, you need to be tough.
Yeah.
You need to
Do you think that was
tough.
effective?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think we should duplicate some of that the objective should be to develop children with enough internal fortitude and character that they can cope with and deal with an imperfect environment around them.
Right.
Rather than to recoil and be, wounded because of a difficult environment.
I do feel like we're at a point now where we're just ego boosting everybody.
It
everything
is
okay, and
yes, you see this especially with the victim. I'm a victim of this and that. It's like, well, guess what? We're all victims to a degree, and we all victimize to a degree. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, that's just life.
Yeah,
that's just life.
Something you got to push through, and
what
doesn't kill you make you stronger. That's as true as it comes, and it's going to shape you, I think, in a positive way.
Yeah.
But I feel like I worked out with my Navy best friend over there is going to Navy SEALs.
Oh, cool! Wow.
So I started working out with him, and he was putting me through some stuff I'd never even heard of.
Yeah.
And it was like I would die during these workouts and exercises.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I'd be better, and I just feel like my mind was in control of everything, And that was like, okay, I need to go through pain to get stronger.
Yes.
That's where it starts, is pain.
Yeah.
And that's on all levels, emotional, physical,
Yeah.
I think that is a huge importance.
I absolutely agree. I think the problem is we're trying to insulate everybody from anything that might ever cause them a lack of peace or cause stress in their life. It's like, well, if you have to go through life wearing a bubble wrap suit, well, that means you're really soft.
Yeah, what's the point at that point?
It's like, why?
Yeah.
And it's... yes, educationally it was good, but they also it's like they strive to train kids to be strong and tough and good. And, So I commend them for that.
That's just like in a natural way where you don't have to do anything. It's just going to throw up a playground that's an obstacle course, and kids are going to love it anyways.
Yeah.
You know, when I was a kid, you know, third to fourth grade, I asked my parents, I wanted my birthday party, I want an obstacle course. That's what I wanted, you know. I wanted to walk on the pillar. If you fell off, you know, you're going to drop a couple feet. And
it's a more recent development. It's a more recent. When I was a kid, I remember my grandparents having a set of yard darts. You know what those are? They're like
where you had to throw them and
they're like massive darts that have a pointy metal thing.
Right.
And you throw it up in the air, and we're trying to aim towards a circle so it would land in the circle. But it's little kids taking sharp metal objects, throwing them up in the air over their head. I mean, I just can't. I mean,
today we think that's unfathomable.
It's unfathomable. Like, you would do what?
And they do make them nowadays too, where it's just like they're all plastic with the round bottoms, and they have like a little bit of sand in them or something.
Do they have like a Nerf head on
it? Pretty much. Yeah. Everything's got to be a little bit softer nowadays.
Yeah. I mean, maybe the yard dart thing was a bad idea. I mean, granted.
But that's like you know that kind of explains of how it's went. You know, it went from you have to be safe on your own and learn on your own to a little bit softer and a little bit softer, and now everything's foam.
And part of that is a reaction probably not an overreaction, but it is a reaction to the fact that everybody can sue anybody for anything, and you know, we're a very litigious society, which is a real pain. I mean, vampire lawyers have destroyed a lot, but it's really to our detriment, and I think it's most so with boys. I really feel strongly that we need to encourage boys to embrace masculinity.
Right.
Now, you hear all the time, we don't want toxic masculinity. Every time somebody says that, I want to say, well, number one, can you tell me what good masculinity is? well, we haven't even thought of that. And number two, would you agree with, I mean, if you're going to start with, there's such a thing as toxic masculinity, is there toxic femininity as well? Is that a category, or is that, no, we're just talking about boys.
Right.
I think that masculinity needs to be ingrained in boys, and masculinity specifically is masculinity in its most clear manifestation is when a man will provide for and protect. When you provide for those around you and you protect the vulnerable and the innocent, that is manhood. And we have just basically snuffed that out. We have. I told my son this. Listen, I want you to be an exceedingly virtuously violent individual, so that at a moment's notice, you will use violence in the defense of the vulnerable. Mm-hmm. I was on a train riding from Perm, Russia, down to Kharkiv, Ukraine, and there was this grandmother. She had a cart full of stuff, and she was going up and down the aisles, selling stuff. And here's this guy. He's probably, mid-20s, and he's drinking a beer. He's hanging out the window, and he's kind of taking up the aisle, and she can't get through. And he was right in front of my door, so I'm sitting there with the kids and Melinda, and he wouldn't let her through. And I hear him start to argue, and it caught my attention. I said, Russian, well, what's going on here? And he said, well, she's big and fat, and I'm here. And I said, tell him, get out of the way. And he's like, well, no, I'm not going to do it. So I grabbed her cart and I began to push it, and he kind of took up the aisle. And so I gave him a good solid shove in Jesus' name. And I was ready to go toe to toe with the guy. And it's not because I like violence or I'm a violent person, but it's because at that critical moment, there was someone who was vulnerable, a grandmother, and she needed someone to step into the middle of that. Mm-hmm. And that's what manhood is. That's what manhood is. And it's not, manhood's not calculating, well, let's see, can this guy take me? Can I take him? It doesn't matter.
It's about doing what's right.
It's doing what's right, yes. And if it costs you, your life, well, that's an honorable way to go.
Yeah.
So that is the kind of thing we need to be teaching boys, but we don't. Boys are different than girls. They are unique and they're special, and we need to not snuff out their masculinity. We need to encourage it. So I think every boy should play with toy guns. Absolutely.
I know, sure as heck I did.
I know.
You know, we had the Nerf guns at one point.
Yeah.
When I was about 5, and then we moved on to the airsoft guns where we were shooting BBs at each other when we were about 9 or 10.
Yeah.
And then we moved on to paintball guns, which that'll teach you something real quick.
Yeah, they leave a welt, but it's awesome. Josiah would do that. He would have airsoft wars and come home and he looked like he had been attacked.
Got chicken pox or something.
Yeah, it's like, my goodness, they're all over him. But that's a good thing, and that's what boys need. They need that kind of. Every boy boys are different than girls. Period. I mean, if you think that gender is a social construct, then I don't know if you must be living in a cave or off planet or whatnot. But you can just see there is this marked difference from boys and girls. Boys do dumb things habitually. You know, it's just that crazy, hey, let's go jump off that roof kind of mentality. That's the way boys are. It's because we're designed to be adventurers and explorers. We're rough and tumble because it's just in us. It's just in us.
And the biological makeup or something, there's different chemicals in there. And
yeah, it's a design feature. And what we have to do is we need to take a boy is a human with appetites and inclinations, and that has to be channeled. It has to be channeled and trained to embrace virtue and honor. And honestly, the highest currency among men is respect.
Right.
And every man wants to be respected by other men, and by his wife, and by his mother and people that he cares about. That's what we need to be instilling in boys. So
I agree. Respect is like. I was talking to a kid today because I sub as a pair at the school.
Okay.
And I'm like, you're not going to do this anymore? Like, shake my hand. Mm-hmm. Like, tell me you're not going to do it on me. Like, this, like, I'm going man to man with you. And he's a 7th grader. Mm-hmm. I'm like, dude, you're a man now. Shake my hand and tell me you're not going to do this anymore. Yeah. That's my way of saying, be honest with me. And if you're not going to be honest and you're going to do it again, don't shake my hand.
Yeah.
Because that'll tell me if I can trust you or not right there. Just a firm shake. That's all I needed with him. And they weren't, or he wasn't used to that, I don't think, because he shook my hand and was like, whatever. And I was being serious with him. Yeah. And then 30 minutes later, obviously he's young and forgets. But I was like, dude, you just lost my respect. He did it again. And I was like, how am I supposed to trust you ever again? How am I supposed to believe what you're saying is true? Mm-hmm. That brings back all of your credibility to what you've said in the past. If you're willing to break a promise within an hour, why is anything else you've told me in your life true? Mm-hmm. And that's something that I've kind of learned over the years. Mm-hmm. I think it was instilled, but it's more of a conscious thought to me now. Yeah. Seeing the world kind of evolve in the way it has recently, how quickly it's changed as well.
Yeah. Well, you look at a guy like Jordan Peterson, who is phenomenally popular, and his message is, be a responsible man. Get your act together. And it's like there's this hunger for it. I mean, men desire to honor and to be respected. And when somebody says, be responsible and do what you should do, and that is the way in which you will receive this respect, it resonates. I mean, guys are like, all right. I mean, there's
well, I think it's almost like guys are waiting for it to be like okay, like right now it's like up in the air, like is it okay, is it not? And then when someone says it, it's like it's trains popularity that quickly. Yeah, which is cool.
Yeah, I definitely think that public education is a system that's been designed primarily for girls in mind. Boys are not designed biologically or mentally to sit stationary for long periods of time.
I have thought about this so much. I'm actually going into teaching. That's my field. And math is my subject. Mm-hmm. So my biggest thought is, how do I get everybody engaged actively as well?
Yeah.
What am I going to do to keep kids' attention and draw them in? And the thing I kept coming to over and over again was I have to get them up and moving, or else they're going to, take a nap in my class.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also use enthusiasm, show passion in what I'm teaching.
Yeah. It's a challenging thing, but, so I learned English grammar by studying Greek. I didn't understand English grammar in high school. I mean, people tried to teach it to me, and blah, blah, and subject, verb, whatever. When I studied Greek, in order to understand Greek, I had to understand grammar. And when I understood that grammar, I would know how to translate into English from this other language. So I had to know Greek. I had to know English grammar as well. And it's like suddenly I needed to know it, so I learned it. Whereas, if you're trying to teach math to boys or teach them fractions or whatever, man, if you can pull out the tape measure and build something with them, and, if you can work in some power tools and whatnot, I mean, that to me seems like the best way to teach things that would be boring if you put it on a chalkboard or a whiteboard. But if you are actually constructing something and building something and incorporating all the senses, I think you should be much more successmul.
Don't think I'm writing anything. I'm just writing down notes for my classroom right here. Actually, though, I think, I'm middle school. So this is a real tough area where you're kind of, shifting into manhood and women are pretty much on that path now, or most of them have gone through puberty at that point.
Yeah.
But still, there's so much going on, and if any little thing I can do will stick, and I'm just hoping to find my groove even before I get in there by just talking to people.
Yeah. I might be speaking beyond my intelligence, which is something I habitually do. But in the younger years, especially in the arena of math, in the younger years, if you can focus on rote memory, I mean, if kids can memorize their times tables. And when I was in fifth grade, I remember we had to stand up and we had to recite our times tables aloud in unison, which was boring and blah, blah. But we'd do that. But even today, now I can 12 times 1 is 12, 12 times 2 is 24, 12 times 3 is 36, and I can work my way through these. When you're young and you focus on rote memory, then when you get into junior high and high school, you don't have to scratch your head and wonder that. You've already got those tools in your brain.
Yeah.
And then you can begin to think more abstractly. So, I mean, that's just my 2 cents on math.
Yeah, and from my understanding of the teachers that I've talked to, it's been really tough since COVID.
Oh, yeah.
Since, it was, and parents weren't even forcing their kids to do the online stuff. So nobody really retained anything. So they're still going up 2 grades, but they went down a grade in their math. And math is not something that's just like, I can teach this, I can teach this. It's like stack, 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 stack. You have to know all the steps leading up to it to be able to, which is just detrimental to the United States.
I have very strong feelings about COVID and how it was used as a means of manipulation and destruction of just all kinds of stuff. I have very strong feelings about that.
I'm sure we could go down about a 24-hour podcast on
that.
Probably,
probably, yes, no doubt. No doubt.
But wrapping it back in. So after Russia, where would we? So
after Russia, did 3 years there. And then we came back to Washington State. And then I for about a year, I just did contracting again. And then we went on the trip, came down to Long Beach, saw the church, did the resume, got hired on as the pastor of First Baptist Church. So been there since 2011.
One of the questions, because I listen to a lot of podcasts as well, and one of that I listened to talked about this, and I was curious what you thought. How has being a pastor evolved over the years, and how has Christianity in general changed? Christianity in general.
Well, the biggest thing that Christianity is facing right now is that we're living in a post-Christian society. for the most part, people used to operate on the assumption of a Christian worldview and Christian morality. That is no longer the case. So, maybe back 40, 50 years ago, you could tell a guy, repent. You can't be sleeping around like a tomcat because that's wrong, and God doesn't like that. And he kind of already knew that, that's not the right type of. Right. And so now we live in a different era where it's like, well, no. The popular notion being taught is in the arena of morality is that all morality is relative. All morality is relative, and I've actually had discussions with people who were several decades younger than me. And I'd ask them, if all morality is relative, just a scenario, would you ever feel comfortable hopping on an airplane and traveling over to some other country and where they're selling women as sex slaves and say, you know what, you shouldn't do that. That's wrong. Because if you think that all morality is relative, you've just disqualified yourself from saying any kind of a value judgment about somebody who's engaged in a horrible sin against humanity.
Right.
If there's no right and wrong, on what basis can you tell someone else to do what is right?
Right. How can you make laws or anything like that?
Yeah. So that is something we're wrestling with right now as Christians. A lot of people. There's a pervasive negative view of Christianity. So back, say in the 70s, Little House on the Prairie. You had Reverend Alland, and he was a good guy. He was looked at as a pillar in the community and just an all-around good guy. Nowadays, if Hollywood or social media presents anything about Christianity, it's hater, bigot, homophobe, ignorant, kill brown people, that kind. And so you've got that right out of the gate. If I say to somebody, I'm a Baptist pastor, like, oh, you're one of the haters. So there is that natural, I've already begun with, I know that you have that view of me. Right. So that is a real challenge for Christianity.
I really hate to hear that because I hate generalization. Mm-hmm. So just because you associate with something does not make you like everybody else. You know, we all have our unique qualities and everybody is their own person, I think. Yeah. I'm Logan. I'm not, I'm not just a Christian, but I'm also Logan. Yeah. I do my own thing. I act how I act, and hopefully follow God in the process.
Yeah. The difficulty I think that we face is often is that we can't distinguish between individuals and movements.
Absolutely, yes.
I have very strong opinions on a whole variety of things, but my opinions are about different ideologies and different belief systems, not about individuals within that. So, you can have an opinion on what is morally good and right and just, and yet it's not that I hate anybody. I might disagree with them, but disagreement doesn't constitute hate. It represents a different perspective on a matter, which in a more civilized era, we could talk about. We could have a mature conversation and say, well, tell me why you think like that, and go back and forth. Yeah. Unfortunately now, we just seem to have lost the ability to even have a conversation with someone whom we disagree with.
Yeah, and I hope that comes back, and
yeah,
I don't know how. Hopefully we're in the process, making podcasts and just having conversations. And I encourage people, even if you disagree, go ahead and say it. And if you want to have a conversation and say your side, I'll have you right on the show.
Yeah, and that's healthy. If you can, and if you have a person who can say, well, this is what I believe, and this is why I believe it, without saying, this is what I believe, and you're a jerk, and you're an idiot, and I hate you, but this is what I believe. If you can get beyond that, okay, let's not call each other names. Let's just put that aside and just have a discussion. That's when you embrace civility again, then I think you can improve. Every Sunday I go to church, and when I preach, I pretty much I have a prepared message and whatnot, so I'm not really doing a give and take. Right. But I have a Sunday school hour with adults, And every Sunday, I walk out of there and I've listened to what people have said. And, maybe they didn't change my mind about something profound, but it's like, there's another nuance to this. So it's a give and take. When I talk to people and sometimes have disagreements, it's like, if I listen and I focus on what they're saying, I might walk away with just a slightly different perspective, not changing my whole worldview or anything like that, but just to see things from a slightly different perspective. So that's important.
I talked to someone else who was, she was talking about, so if you have these ideas and you're not willing to accept any other opinions or listen to anybody else, you're not open to change at all for the rest of your life. Like, is that what you're saying? Like, you're never willing to hear anybody unless they agree with you?
Yeah.
That's kind of a very closed off minded way to think.
It is.
Which is...
I've never been part of somebody's political campaign, but I've always thought to myself, I could talk to a politician and say, hey, you know what? In the process of an interview sometime along the line, if somebody says, well, you said this before and you said this, if they would just come out and say, you know what? Yeah, that was kind of stupid.
Yeah, like
I think
I've
they would
changed
have
since then.
Huge credibility. It's like everybody says stupid things.
And then it starts the notion that it is okay to say that.
Yeah, it's okay to, I was wrong, or you know what, I didn't think about it, or I'm just shooting off my mouth. And I mean, you know how many situations you could deflate and diffuse if you just said, you know what, I was just shooting off my mouth. I wasn't thinking about it.
And,
it's a powerful thing.
I think that's a great message. Glad we were able to talk about that.
Yeah.
Next question I have is, if you could say one thing to someone who doesn't believe in Christ, what would it be?
Well, I would just invite anybody who's a skeptic. Excellent. Skepticism is welcome. I think that every belief system should be analyzed with a skeptical perspective. And I would just invite anybody to do the same thing with Christianity and look it over. I mean,
just try it out a little bit.
Just try it out, study it, listen to what it's saying, and understand that, people have a dichotomy that there's faith and there's reason, and the two don't travel hand in hand. That's ridiculous. If my faith is not built on reason and I don't have good reason to embrace my faith, then no, I don't want to be part of some mushroom cult. Absolutely not. I have faith. First of all, I believe in the Bible. I believe that it is human words, that it's God's revelation in human words, and is written for us and for our benefit. But it also coheres very well scientifically. It also coheres very well archaeologically and historically. You can hop on a plane, fly to Israel, and according to our best archaeological evidence, we can identify the garden tomb where Jesus was actually buried. It's right there. You can travel to Caesarea Philippi, and there you'll find an inscription of when Pontius Pilate was, procurator in Jerusalem. So our faith is built upon history. It's not built upon, some fanciful philosophy. Our faith is very open. The best arguments for believing in God, there are the cosmological, the teleological arguments. These are the moral argument. These are arguments that people philosophically sat down and thought about. And, if there was a God, how would we know? There is ample, reasonable evidence to embrace faith. And the second thing I'd say is anybody who was a skeptic about Christianity is you got to understand that you operate on faith as well. Every single human being operates on faith.
In what way?
We believe things that there is no way we can verify.
Like?
Abraham Lincoln, was he the president of the United States during the Civil War? How do you know? Well, somebody wrote a book about it. Well, really? How do you know they didn't lie?
Right.
Have you ever seen him? Did you ever touch him? Did you ever talk with him? How can you verify anything? And so there's a huge amount of things that we embrace by faith, and it just, things in the past with history. Even the modern. We embrace things about things. The lights are on in this room. How does electricity work? Do we really know? Have you ever gotten out an electron microscope and watched the flow of electrons, going through copper? There's just a ton of things that we accept. We don't fully understand how they work, but we accept that they do work.
Yeah.
So everybody lives on faith. The question is it a reasonable faith? And so I think Christianity offers not only a valid reason for believing in it. The resurrection of Jesus, if that was just some made-up thing, number one, why would they do that? Why would anybody want to follow a dead Messiah? Number two, if those people who wrote the New Testament didn't actually think that Jesus rose from the grave and they actually saw him, interact with him, why would you die for it? There are scores of, not just the apostles who knew Jesus and saw him resurrected, who died for their faith, but there are many people in the New Testament era that they believed the witness that was handed down to them from the apostles and ultimately paid for it with their lives. Now that's powerful, and it deserves a second look. Number one, if somebody finds something that they're willing to give their life for, it's worth. Especially if you're wrestling with what is the meaning of life? Why am I here? And somebody says, I found the meaning of life and I'll die for it. That deserves a second look.
Right.
So I don't know if I'm on first, second, or third, but those are some of the reasons why I would say yes. Consider Christianity. Consider it. And analyze the other religions that are available. The unique thing about Christianity, everybody pretty much understands there's a God and there are humans, and there's a chasm between the two. And it has to do something with we have behaved in such a way that God doesn't appreciate, and it's not. So every religious system has some sort of a mechanism for making propitiation, to make peace with the deity. Whether it's throw a virgin in a volcano or offer food sacrifices or go on a pilgrimage or do something. We gotta placate the divine. Most recommendations are going to be based upon you do this XYZ, and they'll give you a formula. What the God of the Bible and Christianity suggests is that the opposite. Yes, there is that alienation. However, all the heavy lifting was done by God in giving his son so as to redeem people who didn't really care for him, honestly. And he did that to redeem them, not simply to make it so that, all right, I'm not going to send you to hell or I'm not going to vaporize you, but I've given my son to redeem you so that you can be actually my son or daughter, to be a son or daughter of the King. That's truly a unique message. And you're not going to find that in other sources. Yeah,
it seems like a very accepting message to me. Like he wants you to be part of his family. And
you know what's funny? In the early church in the Roman Empire, there were a ton of slaves. It was a very stratified society. You had very wealthy and intermediate, and you had just a ton of slaves. In the church, that was an arena where it didn't really matter what your social class was outside, but when you come inside the church, everyone is equal. People have said that the Bible encourages slavery. Well, actually, it doesn't really encourage it, but it gives a different mechanism for how to deal with it. In the New Testament, the writers said, "Listen, masters, you who have slaves, you need to remember that you're a slave as well, and that this person that is working for you as either an indentured servant or a slave, they are a brother." And conversely, to the people who are slaves, the New Testament writer said, "Hey, do the very best job you can, because you are serving not some earthly master, but in your work and labor, you need to do it unto the Lord." And that kind of mentality that permeated the church between masters and slaves, recognizing their humanity of both, It really was the mechanism in Western civilization to end slavery.
Yeah, I never. Wow, we're connecting a lot of dots for me right here.
Well, look at the abolition movement. The abolition movement in England, the empire in which the sun never set. Slavery was eliminated. Who did it? Who was the driving force? It was the abolitionists. The abolitionists were Christians.
Huh.
Oh my goodness, I can't remember his name right now. It starts with a W. I'll come to it in a minute. But guys like Granville Sharp, who was a Greek scholar, New Testament Greek scholar, he was part of the abolitionist movement. I know anybody who's listening out there is going to know the name of this one famous. He was a politician, and he went into public office simply because he wanted to abolish slavery. And he was successful. It was devout evangelical Christians who said, you know what, slavery is an abomination, specifically the race-based slavery that was prevalent in the Empire of England. This is an abomination. And they got engaged in politics, and through their efforts ended up eliminating slavery. The Republican Party, by the way, the Republican Party wasn't about abolition, was one of their main planks of their party, that the Northern Republicans were an abolitionist movement, and that's why, when you study the Civil War, the election of Abraham Lincoln was just, that Republican, that's what brought about the Civil War.
Right.
So I'm not sure how we got onto Christianity and slavery, but as a rabbit trail. But anyways, it has a profound effect. The New Testament and Western civilization is built upon the Bible, and all of the good and wonderful things that you find that Western civilization has advanced really has the Bible as its foundation.
So if someone was going to pick up a Bible today and was like, I need to, I want to read this, I want to learn about it, where do we start here? Because I'm new to this, personally. It's only been a couple months, and I just hopped in and started reading Matthew. So I didn't know.
A good place to start. Now, you have 4 different Gospels, and the 4 different Gospels all have, they're recording similar, everything similar material, but each of them have a different kind of perspective on it. It's kind of like holding up a precious jewel. When you look at a precious jewel, you don't just look at one side, you kind of spin it around and look at it. Mm-hmm. And all of the Gospels are written with a different unique thrust. Matthew's Gospel, which is very Jewish oriented, it focuses on Jesus as the King of the Jews. He is the Son of David. And to understand the significance of that, you got to go back to the Old Testament and understand David and his promise, the promise that was given to him by God, that he would have a son who would rule forever. Mark presents Jesus as a man of action. Jesus is almost running throughout the whole gospel. He did this, and immediately he did that, and he's jumping all over the place, and he does amazing things. And Mark has this really cool way of weaving stories together and making a unique point. Luke is focused very much on that Jesus is the Savior of all humanity. Luke, as a Gentile, had a unique take on this, that wow, this is a Jewish Messiah that's for me as well as a Gentile, and then John's gospel is focused on the divinity of Jesus, that he is not just a good teacher, but he is the Son of God, and he is God himself, has that quality. So the gospel is a good place to start. I'd probably recommend somebody do Old Testament and New Testament somewhat simultaneously.
Okay.
Genesis is a great place.
I thought about this a lot.
Yeah. Genesis is a great place to start, as well as, the Gospels. Genesis will give you the backstory. The critical things. The whole rest of the Bible is a response to what takes place in Genesis. You've got the fall, you've got the flood, you've got the Tower of Babel, and you've got the call of Abraham. And Abraham, the whole Bible is one big story arc. Adam and Eve get kicked out of the garden. They are excluded from access to the tree of life. They can't even come in the garden anymore. There's, guards set up basically, so they can't have access. Then, but in the whole process of this, screw up, God says to the woman that yeah, you were duped by the serpent or this angel, this fallen angel, but through you, the woman, I'm going to bring about a son who would destroy everything that the serpent has done. This promised son. And while they're outside of Eden, things go sideways in a big way, in a hurry. You've got the flood, you've got the Tower of Babel, and then God picks out a man, Abraham, and says, through you, you're going to be the one that I'm going to bless you, and I'm going to bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you, and I'm going to give you a land, and you're going to have a seed, and you're going to be blessed. And that whole saga of Abraham and his wife Sarah, I mean, God has a funny style, the way he does stuff. He waits till Abraham is, 99 years old before he has his son. He thinks he's an old raisin and there ain't nothing fruitful coming from him anymore. But God, just his style, brings him a son when he's an old man. It was a way of showing that, wow, this was something that God only could do.
Right.
And then through Isaac, you have Isaac and Jacob, and you have the birth of the Jewish people and the promises made to the Jewish people, bringing them into the promised land, and they're in the promised land, and they end up developing a monarchy, and David is the chosen king. There's actually a civil war. It splits into a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom. And about 722 BC, the Assyrian Empire comes in and just deports the entirety of the northern nation of Israel. And then in 586, Nebuchadnezzar comes and basically deports the entirety of the southern kingdom. And there are numerous prophets that say the reason why this is happening is because God made a covenant with us. He spelled it out. He said, you do this and you'll be blessed. You do this and you'll be cursed. And the ultimate manifestation of the curse is that you're going to be banished from your land. And all these prophets kept saying that this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen. You need to repent. Repent of what you're doing. Get back to the covenant. Obey God. And they didn't. But they always looked forward to say there will come a day when God will fulfill the promise that he made to David, that he made to Abraham, that he made to Eve in the garden. And when you come to the New Testament and Jesus comes on the scene, he is the fulfillment of everything that everybody is looking forward to. This is the Son who will bring us back into the garden. And when you come to the very last part of the Bible, the book of Revelation, the very last part of the book of Revelation, there you see a New Jerusalem. And guess what's in the New Jerusalem? The tree of life. The tree of life. That's what we needed access to in the garden. Right. And God has brought us full circle, and he brings us back in. So yeah, I mean, I would start in the Gospels. I would look at especially the historical books of Genesis and Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. These are laws. I mean, this is part of the Mosaic covenant. God said, you're going to be my people. You're going to act like my people. No, do this and don't do this. Then you get into the Judges and into 1st and 2nd Samuel's and 1st and 2nd Kings, and it gives you the history of the nation of Israel up into the deportation. So I mean, it's good to be familiar with that, the history. That'll give you the backbone for which everything in the New Testament. Oh, okay, it's built on that. Yeah. So, but yeah.
Okay, here comes a big question.
Sure.
So I've heard about the sign outside the church.
Oh, which one?
One.
You mean the actual sign, the different messages?
The different messages that come. I don't know if that's weekly or I've never actually seen it. But.
Yeah, I usually change it about weekly. Yeah.
So what's the purpose and what's the message that you want to send with it?
It kind of depends on the particular week and the messages are varied. So, number one, I want to present messages that are sometimes provocative because I want people to think about it. Really, I want to arouse a reaction.
Why do you want to arouse a reaction?
Well, people don't think unless they're aroused.
Do you think that'll make people shut down almost or
some
get
will,
on defense?
Yes. Some will, yes. But Let's say, so I'll give you two examples. Probably the one that I got a lot of reaction, which was kind of surprising. I think I said the trans movement is spiritual darkness. Now, which is a statement that probably 10 years ago everybody would have said, well, yeah, geez, the idea of sterilizing kids and getting them on cross-sex hormones and ultimately amputating parts off of their body, yeah, that's barbaric. That's abusive. So 10 years ago, everybody would have been like, well, yeah, duh. But now it's, I don't know, things have changed in the culture, and it's remarkable. So that created quite a stir. But there's other times where I said that Jesus, the resurrection proves that Jesus is Lord of all. Now, if somebody really understands what that is saying, that's far more provocative. Because the claim of the Bible and the claim of the New Testament, when Jesus was resurrected, he said, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Basically, the message of the New Testament is that Jesus is not just Savior, but he's Lord. And Lord is a word that refers to sovereignty and authority. And so that message that Jesus is Lord is not simply saying that, okay, my sexual life, all right, okay, God, you've got authority there. No, when you say he is Lord of all, you're saying he has authority over my sexual life, over my financial life, over my recreational life, over my relationships. Wait a minute, he is Lord. It's like if you invite him into your house, he says that every room and every cabinet in your house, I have full access to. And I have full access to open the doors and look inside and say, these things please me and these things do not please me. Now that is really, that's more controversial than simply saying that the trans movement is spiritual darkness.
Right.
So Jesus said that the way to the kingdom is like a narrow path. It's small, and not many people find it. Now, the way that leads to destruction is broad. It's like a superhighway, and that's where most people go. And my thrust and desire is not that, number one, I don't think I am better than anybody outside the church. I mean, I've shared in this podcast my background.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a bratty, awful, terrible kid. And even now today, I'm kind of, sometimes obnoxious and rude. And, I kick my dog. Well, not too hard, but, I'm just a guy. I have all the vices every other guy has. So I, number one, don't think I'm any better. I think I'm a guy that needs God's grace and mercy because God sees everything. And he has strong opinions on everything. If you think that someday you could stand before God and say, well, listen, I wasn't a bad guy. I wasn't that bad. I mean, he has every single thing you have ever said and every thought you've ever had. He has it perfectly memorized. You are not going to be able to play the card that I'm innocent or I'm a good guy. He knows us too well.
Yeah.
Therefore, we all need to, repent and say, God, you're right. I have screwed up a lot, and I've done many things very bad. And you're right, and I'm wrong. Will you please forgive me? Will you give me grace and mercy? At the beginning of Pride Month, I put up there, repent of pride, turn to Jesus, and you will be saved. And in place of pride, I could have put, turn from alcoholism, turn from gossip, turn from whatever. All of these things are sin. All these things. I mean, some people say, why focus on the pride movement and LGBT movement and not talk about gluttony? Well, because nobody walks around with a flag, a gluttony flag, and say, yes, be gluttonous. I think that the message has got to be, and it's got to be clear, is that Jesus calls us to repent of everything that he says is wrong. And when you repent and you acknowledge what he says is true about morality, about sexuality, about everything, and you beseech him for his forgiveness, he will extend it. Everybody. But if somebody says, no, this is not wrong, this is fine, this is good, this is okay, that until you are willing to acknowledge something is wrong, you can never ask for forgiveness for it.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what we all need. We all need forgiveness. But if you are advocating a movement that says, no, this is not wrong, it's right, even though God has clearly said it's wrong, then you have locked the door on ever seeking forgiveness. You're just not going to do it. So, yeah.
My only thought is, I get what you're doing, and I just think there might be a better way of portraying that message, and I just feel like people are just going to shut down. Like I don't see the route to the end goal of getting people to think. Maybe I don't know if it's maybe just ask a question on there, or
well,
I've been trying to think about this.
You
know, how I'd fix this, or not fix, but
different methodology.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, I'm always open to suggestions. Logistically, there's only so many letters you can put up, so it is a constant battle. Like, how can I put a message up there with using 7 words? It's
yeah, right.
A stretch. However, I would say that sometimes it does lead to really fruitful conversations. I was out there changing it recently, and some lady walked by and she said, "Oh, what are you putting up there?" And it was actually I don't remember what I put up there, and I put up there. So that's a nice one. Sometimes they're so hateful. So I asked her, "Oh, really? Tell me which ones are hateful. I mean, do you have an idea?" Well, she didn't really know. And I said, "Well, there are certain things I hate. You're right." I told her I hate child abuse. I hate it and I despise it. And is it okay to hate those things? Now, she was a teacher, and well, yes, I hate it too. And so I asked her, "Well, do you think that amputating parts of your body, of children and minors, do you think that's maybe child abuse? Do you think it's abusive?" And she hemmed and hawed, and I basically told her that there are things taking place in the world that I find very offensive, very wrong. And I asked her if you were a church and you were in Nazi Germany and they're carting off the Jews into cars and eventually into ovens. If a pastor would have put a sign out and said, "Burning Jews is spiritual darkness or evil or it's great wickedness," would we look back now and say, "God, that pastor was really provocative"?
Right.
I mean, he could have found a better way to. Maybe he put that sign out there and said, "Burning Jews is wicked and evil," and maybe he alienated some of his neighbors. Maybe.
Well, one of the main, when I heard about this is I wanted people to understand who you are and not just be like, oh, I hate this guy.
The hater guy.
This guy. I'm like, no, understand, where he's coming from and how he thinks, and he's just a guy like you and me,
Yeah.
And if you disagree, go up and have a civil conversation with him.
I would guarantee you that anybody who is outraged by some of the things I say, they have the same tendency. I know other, everybody is welcome here. Let's just play the scenario. Churches say, everybody is welcome here. Everybody, come on in. If a parishioner came in with a shirt, a neo-Nazi who was wearing a swastika on his shirt, do you think anybody would say anything like, hey, you know what? He's just a white supremacist. He's a neo-Nazi, but but you're welcome here. Come on in. Or would somebody say, that's pretty offensive. That's offensive, and it represents an ideology that we're just not going to tolerate here because that's a wickedness. That's evil. I think everyone out there would say, yeah, we don't want neo-Nazis spreading their message. We want to shut them down. Right now we have a real debate in the culture over hate speech laws. Platforms that will shut you down because you say the wrong thing.
This is why I'm on Spotify, because there's the only ones that have complete free of whatever you can say.
Yeah. So that movement says that there are some things that need to be stopped right out because they have the same kind of moral outrage. Well, okay, maybe you have outrage over different things than I do, but you still have moral outrage. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have moral outrage over the trans movement and what's happening to children. It just infuriates me. It's an abomination. The people who would say that I'm a bigot and a hater or homophobe, they feel the same way. It's just a different topic. I mean, nobody's going to be out there saying, you know what, we embrace everybody, white supremacists included. No, they're not going to say that, because they have the same kind of animus towards that movement of white supremacy that I have against the trans movement. So, I don't know. And actually, probably only about, I would say, 1/3 of my messages are provocative. I mean, a lot of them are, they're very, I mean, actually this week it's congratulations to the graduates. So just, I had up there, when the BLM riots were taking place, I put up there that we support our local police. I don't know if that was provocative. Probably, maybe it was provocative, but a lot of times it's just a message of repent and believe. But the message of the New Testament that Jesus is Lord of everything is a very dividing message. There were people that came up to Jesus and said, hey, what do I need to do? What do I need to do to inherit eternal life? And, there's one guy, he said, well, let's see. How are you doing with the commandments? Have you obeyed them? He said, oh, yes, I'm stellar. I've done very good. And all these things. It's okay, good. I got one more thing for you to do. And this guy was wealthy. He said, go give away all your wealth and come follow me. Now, it's not because Jesus has a problem with wealthy people.
Yeah.
But he knew that this man, he had an idol in his heart, and it was his wealth. And he said, the man walked away, and he walked away from salvation. He walked away from Jesus, because Jesus does not share space. He can't be, he's my 75% of the time Lord, and, other 25% of the time that's mine and whatever. No, he doesn't share space. Right. And the message of Christianity is to come fall upon your knees before him. He will extend forgiveness. But then he says, we're going to start changing some things. I'm going to make you into one of my disciples. You're not going to be a fisherman anymore. I'm going to give you a whole new identity and a whole new vocation, and I'm going to change you. You're going to be new. You're going to be like me. And that includes him extending his jurisdiction to every part of life. Every part of life. I mean, my screen time, it means my finances, all of it. So, I mean, if anybody was considering Christianity and they're like, well, I can maybe give it, if anyone thinks that being a follower of Jesus means that I just say these magical words or some sort of incantation and I will, escape hell, no. Christianity is an invitation to come and make Jesus your Lord and to follow him. Come and follow me. He told his disciples, and he still tells that to us today, come and follow me. And it's a painful journey sometimes.
Yeah, I like we said earlier, I think pain is a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a great way to learn.
It's a transformative agent.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one final question for you. If there's one message that you hope you left with your children, what would it be?
I guess with my children, it would be similar to what I would hope my legacy would be, is number one, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Obey him and follow him and trust him. It's a hard thing to do, but it is the best thing to do. And secondly, as you interact with people, always be a person of conviction. Know what you believe. Don't hide from what you believe. And be true to your beliefs. I mean, be true to what is real. That would be my admonition I would give them. So don't worry about 401ks. Don't worry about retirements. Don't worry about second homes. I mean, all that stuff is.
Just worry about doing the right thing.
Oh, man. Yeah. Everything that you own in this life will someday be part of a yard sale and then will eventually be part of a landfill.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, this was a great conversation.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
let people know where
Yeah,
they can
I will.
find you, your contracting business, if they want to get a hold of you?
Basically, I've got cards at Bud's. A lot of people know me. So I usually have too much work. That's not the problem, advertising. So now, when you put this on Spotify, you'll go ahead and send me a link and whatnot, because I'd like to share that with some other people as well.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the time. This is a good conversation.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I had an awesome time. I learned a lot. I'm going to re-listen to this one a few times.
Oh, well, yeah. I hope I didn't talk too fast.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.